Hey guys, welcome back to the Cinema 4D tutorial series on constraints. In this part, we're going to be taking a look at the position constraint. We're going to be talking about what it does, and then we're going to be putting together a little rig to show how you might want to use it. Okay, so let's set up something simple to show what the position constraint does. So I'm going to create a cube, and I'll just duplicate that over to create another one. And when you apply the position constraint, you can do so in the same manner in which we applied the aim constraint, which is you select the object that you want to be constrained, and then you shift select the other object. Then we call up the command for the position constraint. Now you'll notice that it immediately jumped over to the position of the first cube. And of course, this is to be expected because it's called the position constraint. It's going to constrain the position of one object to the position of another. So what we want to do is offset the position. So we're going to click on the tag, and what we want to look for down here is the constraint offset feature. So you may need to twirl that open. And for this, I'm just going to use the X. So we'll just push this over in the plus X direction. Alright, so now whenever we move this first cube, the second one will always move with it. Now there is one thing to take note of here. This is called the position constraint. It's not the rotation constraint. So if we were to adjust the rotational values of this first cube, you'll notice that the second cube does not rotate with it. And it doesn't matter which one of the three rotational values we change, that second cube is not going to move. And that's also to be expected because this is the position constraint, not a rotational constraint. So this works in the same way that the native Cinema 4D position constraint works as well. So I'll just delete that tag off of there. And we want to select the object that we want to constrain, shift select the second one, go up to Character, Constraints, Add Position Constraint. And of course, it's going to jump over again. So we need to click on the PSR tab here. Right now, we only have position enabled. Now, if you also wanted to enable the scale or rotation, you would have to enable those two options there. So we'll open up the offset and we'll just push that over, just like we did with the CD position constraint. And now when we move this first one, the second one will move with it. And if we try to rotate, you can see nothing is happening. Again, this is a position constraint. If you wanted it to rotate, you would need to enable rotation. Now, if we select the first one and rotate, you can see now it rotates with it. All right, so let's look at another example. So I'm going to delete that, and let's delete the second one. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make 4 of these cubes. And we might as well just keep them all evenly spaced. And I'll make one more. Alright, so we have 4 cubes here. Now, even though we only have 4 cubes, there's only 3 spaces between the cubes. We have 1, 2, and 3. So that means that the second cube is 1/3 of the way between the first one and the fourth one. And it means that the third cube is 2/3 of the way between the first one and the fourth one. Now let's say that we wanted to animate the position of one of the end cubes. And when we animate it, we want to make sure that the 2 cubes in the middle stay evenly spaced between the first one and the fourth one. So how exactly would we do that? How could we set this up to where the 2 cubes in the middle always stay evenly spaced between the cubes on the end? This would be a good example of how to use the position constraint. So we'll select the second cube, shift select the first one, then we'll shift select the fourth one and call up the command for the position constraint. Now you'll notice that when we did that, that second cube jumped over halfway between the first one and the fourth one. And the reason why it did that is because in the tag, it added 2 targets. So basically what's happening here is that it can't be in both positions at the same time. So it's going to go halfway or 50% between the two targets. Now you'll remember earlier that I said that that second cube is 1/3 of the way between the first one and the fourth one. So what we want to do is we want to enable the Use AB Mixer. So we'll turn that on, and this will allow us to slide that cube back and forth in position to where we want it. So 1/3 of the way will be 33%. So we'll move this down to 33%. So now we can do the same with the third one. So we'll select the third cube, shift select the first, shift select the fourth, and call up the command for the position constraint. Now you'll notice that the third cube went halfway, so we need to use the AB mixer on that one as well. But this time, instead of going to 33%, we want to go up to about 66%. So now if I select either one of the end cubes and move it around, you'll notice that no matter where I move its position, that the two cubes in the middle will always stay evenly spaced between the first one and the fourth one. Now there's also another way to do this without using constraints, but there are some limitations to it, and that's using the cloner object. So I'm just going to duplicate that first cube, and we'll just move it up a little bit here, and I'm going to add this to the cloner object. So we know we want 4 of them, and we want to take them over in the plus X direction. Let's go over 1,000. Now you'll notice that that end cube over here, the fourth one, it has a little orange dot in the center. So if we were to click on that dot and move it around, you can see that the two cubes in the middle are always staying evenly spaced between the first one and the fourth one. Now there is a little bit of a limitation to this. If we were to select the first cube, which is actually selecting the cloner object, and we were to try to move that around, you can see that all 4 of those cubes are moving. So you need to make sure that you click on that little orange dot. It may be hard to see, but there's a little orange dot there in the middle of that one as well. So if you click on that, now that gives us the ability to move that side. And you can see that the 2 inner cubes are staying evenly spaced. Now if you decide that you're going to use this method using the cloner object, there are some issues you need to be aware of. Let's say you wanted to animate the position of the 4th cube. You would just click on the little orange dot and move it around to where you wanted it. But where exactly do we make the keyframes at? If you look at the coordinates tab and move the 4th cube, you can see that none of those values are moving. So the only place to make the keyframe would be under the Object tab down here where it says X, Y, and Z. If you pay close attention to those values, when we move the 4th cube, you can see those are moving. But what about the first cube? What if we wanted to animate that? If we were to move that one around, you'll see that those same X, Y, Z values there are moving, just like they were with the 4th cube. So obviously that's going to cause some problems. So let's make a couple keyframes and I'll show you what I mean. So I'm going to make some keyframes for X, Y, and Z, and we'll go 30 frames over. We'll move that one up. We'll make some more. We'll go over to 60. We'll move that one over, maybe move that one that way. And then we'll go to 90 frames and we'll push that down and maybe that one over there. Now watch what happens when I hit rewind back to the beginning. That cloner object is no longer in the place where it originally was. And if I hit play, you can see the animation is happening way out of the frame over there. So making keyframes here for both the first cube and the 4th one, that's not going to work. So I'll just delete those keyframes and we'll just move this back over. So the only way to avoid this problem is to remember that anytime you're going to be animating the end object of the cloner object, you need to make the keyframes here under the Object tab. But if you're going to be moving the position of the first object, you need to click on the Coordinates tab. And if we move that around, you can see that those three values there for X, Y, and Z, those are the ones that are now moving. Now this can be a little confusing because you might forget to switch back and forth between the two tabs, although you can hold down Shift to select multiple tabs, and then you can just do it that way if you wanted. But personally, I think using the constraint method here, using the position constraint, is just much easier, as all you have to do is make keyframes for this object and keyframes for this one. Alright, so now that we have a better idea of how the position constraint works, let's put together a little rig to show how we can use it. So a while back I was going to put together a tutorial on a curtain pulley system, and I was going to show you how to build this little rig to open and close a curtain. And that particular rig was going to use the position constraint. So rather than making that tutorial at a later time, I might as well go ahead and show you now, seeing as how we're talking about the position constraint. So I'm going to just delete these cubes that we were using before. And I'm going to keep this simple, so we're just going to work with cubes again. So rather than set these up one by one and have them evenly spaced, what I'm going to do is put it into a cloner object. And let's go with a 5 count this time. And we'll take this over to 1000. So something like that I think will be okay. And then we'll make the cloner editable. That will give us our 5 cubes. Alright, so basically what we're going to do here is we're going to build a little rig that's going to be used to open and close a curtain. And by the time we're done with it, there's only going to be one object that we'll have to animate and make keyframes for, and that will control the whole thing. So we can start by applying the position constraints. So we'll select the second one, shift select the first, shift select the fifth, and apply the position constraint. Now you notice that when we did that, it goes halfway, so we'll enable the A/B mixer, and because we have 5 cubes this time rather than 4, we'll need to bring this down to 25%. So now we can move on to the next one. So we'll select the third one, shift select first, shift select fifth, add the position constraint. That one stays halfway. We'll move on to the third one, which is the fourth one. Shift select first, shift select fifth, and apply the position constraint to that one. And we'll need to enable the A/B mixer and take this to 75%. So now we need to create the curtain. So I'm going to go to a top view. I'm going to grab the spline pen tool, and I'm going to change the type over to cubic, and I'm just going to draw some zigzag lines through here. So I think something like that will be okay. And what we want to do now is duplicate that, but before we do, we want to add that to a loft nurb. So we'll drop that into the loft nurb, then we'll duplicate that one, and the bottom spline we just want to pull down, and we need to take this up above the grid just so we can see it a little better. So I'm going to select everything in the scene and I'm going to pull it up. Alright, so there is our curtain. Now, I want to keep this simple and easy when we do this because I want to be able to play this in the viewport, and I want the cloth simulation to be fairly quick and fast when we play through it. So I'm just going to add just a few more subdivisions to this loft nurb, but I'm going to keep it pretty low poly. So I'm going to take this up a little bit. Let's add a few more. 35 and 20, I think that'll be okay. And we'll make that editable. I'm going to set the Phong angle to something like 80. Alright, so there's our curtain, and we also need to make these cubes editable as well. Alright, so we want to select the loft nurb. I'm going to position that down here at the bottom, and I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to go to, I think it's going to be under simulation tags, cloth. Now, more than likely on your end, if you're following along with this, you're probably going to want to play around with some of these settings on your own. I'm just going to go through them and just make a couple of adjustments to them. I think all of these here will be okay. I just don't want it to be too stiff. All right, so we want to start adding some belt tags to this, and we're going to be using 5 of them, 1 for each one of the cubes. So we want to be in point mode for this, and we're going to right click on the loft NURB object, which is the curtain, and we're going to go to Simulation Tags, Cloth Belt. So it's asking us for the belt on, and we've got this empty link box. So we're going to grab the first cube and drag that in. This is the first cube over here on the left-hand side. So that would be the first cube, and we're going to click on the loft NURB. And what we want to do is we want to select some points. So I'm going to select those points there. I'm going to click back on the belt tag, and I'm going to click on Set. And you can see some yellow lines popping up, and that tells us that now those points are set to that cube. So now if we wanted, we could just control click and drag over to duplicate that belt, and now we can drag in the second cube, but you can see we've got some lines going across there, so we need to click on Clear, and we need to select the points for that second one and then click on Set. And now we can do this a few more times for the remaining cubes. So we'll drag in the third cube, click on Clear. I'll select some of those points there, click on Set. We'll duplicate that tag, drag the fourth one in, click Clear. Select those points, click on Set, and then we'll do the final fifth cube. We'll drag that one in, Clear. Select our points, Set. All right, so now all we need to do is just animate the position of this end cube, or if you want, you could do this one, but for this, I'm just going to animate the fifth one. So before we start moving this end cube, I want to make a little more time in the timeline. By default, it's set to 3 seconds. So I'm just going to lengthen it up to 10. All right, so we'll make a keyframe there at frame 0, and we'll go up to 150, and we're going to push this into where it's almost open all the way. Make another keyframe, and then we'll go to the end, and we'll pull that back a little bit more. Make another keyframe. So now if we hit play, there's the curtain opening, and then it's closing back. Now there's some issues there with the simulation, and that's probably because we need to go back to the cloth tag, and we need to probably bring the stiffness down a little bit, the iterations, maybe bring them down. The friction needs to come down some, and the bounce, we'll leave that where it's at. So we can try it again now. It looks a little better, but I think the friction needs to come down even more. And the bounce will bring down. Go back again, hit play. Now also keep in mind that I think scale plays a role in this as well. And this curtain is rather large. If we were to take a measurement on this, and one way that we could do this is just go over here to a front view. So let's take a spline and we'll draw a point up here at the top and then a point down at the bottom. And if we select both of those points, you can see here under the size value for Y, we have 5,334 centimeters. Now, my math isn't the greatest, but I think that's probably approaching 200 feet in length. So that is a rather large curtain. And I'm still not sure if Cinema 4D takes size or scale into consideration. But if it does, then this is way too large. So keep that in mind if you're going to be doing this. But however, with that being said, the focus of this was not going to be on the actual cloth simulation, but rather on the system at the top that controls it using the position constraints. Alright, so I think that's going to wrap up this video on the position constraint. If you have any comments or questions about it, feel free to comment below. And as always, guys, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next tutorial.